Yeah, welcome everyone to this wonderful panel around retail, future of retail, what the pandemic has meant to us. I think we're very, very lucky to have a set of panel members here who are esteemed and sort of done wonderfully in the pandemic and even before that. Let me take a minute or two to introduce the panel members before we get to hear their views around the topic of interest. I'd like to introduce Pratik Pota, who's the CEO and whole-time director at Jubliant FoodWorks. Sangeeta Pendulkar, CEO Pantaloons at Aditya Birla Fashion and Retail Limited, and Abhishek Ganguly, MD Puma India. Thank you for joining us today, this evening, gentlemen and ladies. Let me start with you, Pratik. I think the big question for all of us is, and everyone sort of looks at your company with a lot of interest, a lot of home delivery happening. What has changed in the pandemic, and how have you looked at the whole change impacting consumers and your company from the outside?
No, thank you, Harsh, and good to be here. I think COVID, like it was for everybody else, came as a sudden, almost body blow, and it impacted us first quite abruptly. All our dining operations were shut completely. We weren't allowed to operate our dine-in stores. And what wasn't so well known was that 1/3 of our revenues, a little bit more, actually came from dine-in. So that revenue stream went off overnight. Every store required us to take permissions locally for it to reopen for delivery. Our consumers and our customers were very, very concerned and anxious about either going out, which for the most part they couldn't, or even getting food home. So there was an overnight change in customer behavior. There was increased anxiety, increased concern, increased restrictions. People, our own employees, physically weren't able to come to the stores. And of course, there was a concern about their own safety. We had to ensure customer safety. We had to ensure that we rolled out adequate protocols to make sure that our store teams were taking all the steps necessary for complete customer safety. And finally, of course, like everybody else, we had to move virtually overnight to working from home. So all of those dramatic and sudden changes posed a lot of challenges for us, like it did for most other companies. But I think if I look back now, it's been a long time. It's almost a year, well, 9 months plus. Quite pleased with the way we coped with the challenges as they came our way, and the way we managed to get business back on its feet. But I'm sure we'll talk more about it as we go along.
Thank you, Pratik. I think a wonderful start as we get in. Let me move to you, Abhishek. A different industry. How did stores stack up for you? What did it mean? I think it meant a lot of difficult times for the industry, at least in fashion. But how did you see this coming? Did you see it coming, if at all? What were the big things that you had to look out for from an external environment perspective?
Well, I think the most dramatic thing of the entire pandemic and the impact on us as a business was the suddenness. And nobody expected it. And also the speed in which it impacted us, right? It was completely unprecedented. And I think it took us off gear, off guard, both professionally and personally. Lives changed. First thing that it comes to my mind about what happened was, as an organization, we've been very lucky in the Indian market to always been growing at a very, very fast pace. We came into the country pretty late vis-a-vis competition. We went ahead of competition and we had some phenomenal growth. Now, the phenomenal growth also comes with a mindset and attitude that an organization builds as its DNA. Now, this was an aggressive, assertive mindset that we as an organization had in the market. And suddenly, you're having to reverse it. We were never prepared for a crisis. We were always prepared. We had a growth mindset. And so the biggest challenge that I faced was to how do you convert this growth mindset into surviving the crisis mindset? So right from financial KPIs, which we were managing, to how we need to manage cash, and that became the most important financial KPIs, taking care of people who just stumbled and unsure, ensuring that everyone kept their job and their salaries. I think these became priorities in the beginning. And I think the thing that always strikes me is that we had to change our mindset and become far more, because we always looked at growth as the most important driver for us, and that changing meant a lot of adjustments. But once we took that over, I think it was about finding our path. Thankfully, I represent a category which is growing even during the pandemic, because people are taking care of themselves, investing in themselves, and hence sports, fitness is something that they have continued to invest, and now, in fact, increasing their investments. And so we have an opportunity of our market actually growing. So now we are having to just say that, okay, how do we capture this back? In the heart of everything is that we cannot today realize that we have a certain plan. We all businesses were used to an annual operating plan. Now that is out of bounds. That's out of gear, right? You need to relook at your business, where you are, always reevaluate business, and be flexible and nimble enough in the organization to react. I think that's the biggest takeaway that I have had.
Thank you, Abhishek. I think, and Sangeeta, I'll just like you to also reflect. While I look at the external environment, and you sort of heard Pratik talking, you heard Abhishek, there's a different scale of retail that you operate with in your company. Now, what did it mean? Did plans make sense at all? Were you expecting it? And how did you how did you see other people responding to it in the industry?
Great. Thanks, Harsha. So when I look back at the last, I think in about 10 days, it will be exactly 11 months since the pandemic first started. And if I look at the last 11 months, just experiencing it personally first, I think I see three phases of it. When it was just starting, I think as an organization, of course, credit to my team, we saw it coming probably a week or 10 days earlier than most other people. And we took some very proactive actions in terms of enabling people to work from home, making sure, literally in a week, everybody was given laptops versus desktops, getting printers, in people's home. And we probably reacted a little bit before even the government asked us to. But when I look at the last 11 months, that's just to your question, whether we saw it coming. I don't think anybody saw it coming at all, right? None of the business continuity plans you see across organizations, nobody had called anything like this out. So, but the 11 months, I see it in three phases. There was an initial react and panic phase where we didn't know what was happening. We don't know how long it's going to be. We were all thinking of when is business going to come back? Business was down to zero. We were shutting down stores. We started talking about scenario planning, not knowing how to forecast. So I think that was a phase which was completely mired with panic and uncertainty. And I think about 4 months into this came the next phase, which I think more mentally and psychologically, it was a bit of a 6 months later, so it was a bit of a stabilized phase where we kind of understood what this meant. Stores started opening up, looking at how store operations, coming back with safety as our first criteria. Critical need to reinvent business models because the shopper wasn't coming to our stores. And therefore we needed to find innovative ways of reaching the shopper. And we'll talk a little bit more about it. And therefore strategies to manage a new business model and to define what the new model is. Cash was critical, managing for cash, which in case of retail, as you know, there are three big elements of cost. There are rentals that we pay. Our inventory is another big investment, and salaries. And therefore, managing cost and liquidity became an important aspect, and thinking through that after the first 4 months of the pandemic, which I call the so-called stabilized phase. And I think where we are today is the recover phase. I think some industries are just about back to last year's numbers. So within retail, some of the categories, but some are still lagging behind. And here, as we get a sense of what the new normal is going to look like, rationalizing stores, assortments, categories, increasing share of certain categories, I think all those actions happen. So I think the challenges in each of these three were different, as I just called out. But overall, if I had to summarize, there were, I think, 5 challenges that I saw. One is, as I said, the need to reinvent our business model was the first one. The second was accelerating our journey in terms of digital, right? And I think while all of us were evolving in our digital journey, I think COVID just precipitated and accelerated the need, and it was a bit of a collective call. It required all stakeholders realized it instantaneously that you had to do this. So I think the second one for me was accelerating the plan for digital transformation. The third one, I think the biggest one was on employee engagement. With remote working, how do you kind of, it required different stretches as a leader. The fourth one, personally, it was digging deep into the reservoirs of resilience and staying optimistic as a leader. I think that was a very big challenge. And finally, building new capabilities in the organization as we embraced our digital transformation. So these are the 5 challenges. Happy to dive into more, but I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Sangeeta. Wonderfully sort of summarized here. Pratik, coming over to you, you did mention the challenges from an external environment perspective. And we also hear of the kind of change your enterprise has done during the course of COVID. So what are some of the thoughts or some of the main things which have stayed with you, which were really big time changes that you made within your organization? Maybe it's leadership or the leadership style, or maybe it's the way you engage operationally, but 2 or 3 things which the audience would be really keen to hear from you.
So Harsha, of course, many learnings over the last 9 months, but I'd like to call out a few of them. I think the first one is that this crisis called upon us to react with agility, with a fleetness of feet that we hadn't really sort of been preparing for. So how do you create different scenarios? How do you work with inadequate data, an uncertain view of the future, but yet take calls very, very quickly? That was the first learning for us as a team. Number one. Number two, how do you flex your operating model to be relevant to your customers, to your communities when required? So to give an example, when we started reopening our stores in early April, as I said earlier, dine-in was shut, but delivery was operational. But our customers were looking for more fundamental products and needs, staples, dal, chawal, atta. So we quickly did a pivot and we said our delivery ecosystem is ready. Can we use that infrastructure? Can we use our fleet to deliver staples and deliver essential products? And we tied up with a bunch of other FMCG companies to deliver, rice, wheat, milk, etc., oil, salt, chai, etc. So the second part was how do you evolve your operating model very quickly? The third thing is this was a time to take bold calls. To give an example, a couple of examples actually. The first one was we decided to shut more than 100 of our stores. Now these stores were profitable pre-COVID, but post-COVID, given the nature of the channel mix, with dine-in being shut, mall visits being sort of curtailed, these stores we saw would not be profitable over the next couple of years, even if they came back to the normal growth. So we took a call to shut 100 stores. In any retail business, shutting stores is very, very painful. It's like doing a surgery on yourself. But we took that call knowing that we would come out of this more lean, more efficient. But as we shut the 100 stores, we said that we would reopen at least one store for every store that we had shut. So we'd end the year with the same kind of network. The other bold call that we took was innovations. So we entered the packaged foods range with a brand called Chef Boss. We launched our biryani foray with the launch of Ekdam Biryani last month. Yeah. So therefore, again, how do you move fast? How do you pivot and evolve quickly? How do you take bold calls? And the fourth learning, if I may add, was on people. I think we all know this as leaders, that our employees don't come into the workplace every morning just for salaries. They come in increasingly because they're inspired by a sense of purpose, of being of value to communities. So how do you rally the troops and rally the organization towards a higher sense of purpose, towards a mission? Look, the government of India had said delivery was an essential service, yeah, in line with the frontline healthcare workers. So how do you use that to really rally the troops? And how do you, as Sangeeta was saying earlier, how do you keep the employees engaged remotely? How do you create new rituals? How do you over communicate? How do you keep your own morale up? This is like, look, leaders are known to manage crises. That's what we are here for. But typically in a crisis, the way leaders have access to more information. This was the first crisis where there was information symmetry. Everybody knew exactly the same thing. So how do you then project confidence? How do you inspire confidence? How do you remain optimistic, knowing as much or as little as everybody else? So for us as leaders, it called us to dig into very, very deep reservoirs of strength and to stay optimistic, stay positive, stay energized, and to transmit that energy remotely and virtually over Zoom calls to the larger organization. So many learnings. And look, for us, we are in discretionary category, and we knew that the recovery would be a little slower than it would be for other business which were into staples, into essentials, or into healthcare. But really pleased that as we speak today, we have recovered all of our revenues of last year. We declared our results, and we are back to growth. We are more profitable than last year. So with revenues being just equal to last year's revenues, our margin profile has improved significantly. We are adding many more stores now. We added 50 stores last quarter, the highest ever in our history for Domino's. And we are now shifting the narrative absolutely clearly from recovery to growth, and not just ordinary incremental growth. We believe we are in for a period of hyper growth. So I think the worst is behind us, and we are a lot more optimistic about the future.
Thank you, Pratik. Thank you for the wonderful set of examples, and thank you for the leadership examples too. As I move to Abhishek, Pratik, maybe you can just check your internet because you're sort of wavering at times. While we move to Abhishek and come back to you, it sort of distorts at times at your end. Maybe you can look at that while we come back to you. Abhishek, I think this wonderful set of examples, as you said, and sort of you were always in the growth mode, I would say. A little bit of break sort of was applied during the initial few months, I guess. What were some of the examples that you had, or some of the leadership? Where did you have to actually take strong leadership calls and difficult calls in a time where perhaps stores may have been shut or business may not have been as strong as what you were expected?
So the biggest leadership call is, I think I will take from what Pratik said, was around people. So the true character of a leader, I firmly believe, is when you have a crisis of this magnitude, right? Because for me, it was about, if today there are about directly and indirectly 6,000 people whose livelihood is, who direct earning and livelihood of them and their families is depending on our business in India, and they have got us to where we have. How do we ensure that they are protected? So, and prioritize that over everything else. Also, the very fact that even when the unlocking happened, whether it was our warehouses, whether it was the factories who make products for us, or our retail stores, these are the people who stepped out of their houses when a lot of us continue to work from home. And they also have elderly parents and younger kids. So having that empathy, I think empathy in leadership was never as important as during the crisis. And I hope that stays with a lot of us. So I think having that empathy of what people go through. So we had to do a lot of things in terms of, we did a lot of things. First and foremost, we did not let people go. And this is at every level. We didn't let even services like, housekeeping, security at stores, or we ensured that everyone stayed afloat with us, even if stores were closed. They did not have to take salary breaks. And we prioritized that as the most important thing. We increased medical insurance for, the family members as well as people, especially for those who were outside their houses. So we did a lot of things. So I feel that these are the people who got us here, and these are the people who will take us to hopefully the hyper growth that we will also see. And I think that was my biggest focus point. The second thing is that you need to reoperate the business, imagine the business in which how you reach to the consumer, and for that, requires dynamism in the supply chain, rehauling of the supply chain, rehauling of ways to go to market, which we did. Digital has been a journey that Puma has been for a while now. So thankfully that helped. And I'm not talking just of e-commerce where we are substantially leveraged, but I'm also talking about our approach to digital, our approach to reaching out to our consumers through digital media, social media. So all of these things help. But net, I think the takeaways were people, nimble and dynamic attitude, and the third is that you don't overcommit to a plan. Gone are the days when you say, okay, focus on this thing on your business. It is about reevaluating and reimagining business, which has become very, very important. And we are also extremely bullish. We are seeing tailwinds coming back. We also firmly believe that for every pizza that Pratik is selling, people are running 5 kilometers and buying the right gear for that. So we are also seeing that happening, and we are very, very extremely positive. I think India has been able to manage so far. Fingers crossed, have been able to manage the crisis much better over the last couple of months. We're seeing that back in business. There is a positivity with the budget coming in. So I think overall, fingers crossed, we will be out of this and we will emerge stronger and we will all be better business professionals.
Abhishek, thank you. I'll always remember that example around Pratik selling more pizzas and people running that much more. I sort of reflected to Sangeeta in terms of what it means for her her side of the business.
Hopefully they'll wear the right clothes.
Yes. So Sangeeta, over to you. I think it's a very nice point, which I think even Abhishek made in terms of people, leadership, empathy. Yeah. So I'll be keen to get your views on this, and also I think as Pratik mentioned, any examples which have been very close to your heart, which would be good to share here.
Sure. So I think in terms of how we addressed our challenges, I'll split it in two parts. One is in terms of how did we address the people and the leadership challenges? And the second is in terms of what did we do in terms of business and how we reinvented our business. And I think some great examples from both Pratik and Abhishek. Personally, I feel again that, this crisis actually tested organizational character and leadership to the hilt, right, for all of us. And when you think back where we were, 10 months ago and even 7 months ago, I think it was a real test for everybody. At an organizational level, and remember this crisis, when you look at it, the world has faced other crises, right? There have been economic downturns and there have been, natural disasters and calamities. But this is very different because this really had it had uncertainty linked to it. We didn't know. It's not like an earthquake that lasted for a few minutes or a few days at best, but we didn't know when this was going to end. And I think that was a defining character of this crisis versus some of the others, which made it even more difficult. So there's a health risk, there's a life risk, and there is uncertainty. So we don't know how far this is going to go. And you just had to, as I said earlier, portray yourself as an optimistic leader, but take actions that provided reassurance to people first on their safety and life. And I think that was our first point of focus. And, both at ABFR level and the Aditya Birla group level, I think that was defined as very, very imperative agenda and a critical agenda. So I think safety of people, the kind of protocols we put in place, and our store staff, like Abhishek said, the store staff and the warehouse staff were the first ones to come back. What kind of protocols you need to put in place to help them feel safe, because at the end of it, they're taking a risk just trying to do their jobs and coming to their workplaces versus some of the other functions who had the option of working from home. These functions had to be at their workplaces. So I think safety first was the biggest agenda. Also with that, I think some great examples of the healthcare support that was set up in terms of attachment to hospitals, in terms of reaching out to people. I mean, lots of people have lost their near and dear ones in this, as all of us would have experienced. So I think providing that medical infrastructure support and safety protocols was one part of it. But I think the larger part of it was on employee engagement. And in terms of how do you find new ways to engage people, right? Because it was a new way of working. We all lost an intuitive feel to a workplace, and we lost face-to-face interactions. And I think two things that really worked for me. One is how I thought as a leader I needed to be. And at the same time, there is a lot of work happening. We were working, 9 to 9 every single day during those few months. And it continues because there was just so much to sort out. Besides providing reassurance and confidence, I think a lot of it was also about engaging with people both at a personal level, having some no agenda calls while you're doing these meetings, just checking in on people. I think even off late in the last 3 months, because a lot of people have come out of it and are now coming back to office, just 2-hour sessions with 10 people digitally over a cup of coffee, asking them what their experiences were, what they went through, sharing it with people. I think just in terms of building that connection with people, I think has really helped me stay close to people and stay connected to people. And overall, as a leadership tenet, Abhishek alluded to it, I think empathy was a great one. Now, we know empathy always forms a very, very important aspect of EQ. But here, empathy was, of course, it needs to be authentic, but you're navigating through uncertainty. People are stressed because of the problems, and they have work to do. You just needed to find that right balance of being directive and yet being inclusive. And finding those different ways of being inclusive with people, I think, is just something that I had to kind of find time and again. And with this work-life balance to work-life integration, that shift, helping people with that. So putting a set of policies, no calls after 7, additional pressure at home. How do people kind of, making sure that there are adequate breaks, and how do you create some sort of a separation between your desk and a meeting, which you could do at office? I think helping people with that and helping them adjust better, I think, are some of the actions that help us. But as a leader, I think empathy stood out for me as the big one. And the second one I would call out is agility. And that's a good segue into the second part that I said. We had to take some actions on the business very, very quickly, literally on the fly. We had to anticipate and rethink the customer journeys, which have all got disrupted. Right? And that, I think, was the fundamental issue. We were on a journey as far as digital transformation is concerned, but we had to accelerate a lot of things which we were going to do in the next financial year. Came to fruition actually 6 months back, which is, I think, again, a fantastic speed that teams have demonstrated. So without really having any sort of dashboard or knowing where you're going into the future, but having a good sense of intuition and judgment, and taking some risks, I think, was very important. So new models, new ways of reaching the consumer, the go-to-market, whether it was setting up temporary Pantaloon stores inside buildings and societies, whether it was a Pantaloon store in a mobile van going across different buildings, or very quickly adapting and moving to our omni-channel model, which was supposed to be launched in February. We actually launched it way back in July, working through it from April to June. I think that's again a great example. Today, 200 plus stores of ours are connected in terms of omni-channel, or whether it was social commerce. Today, a shopper can call any of our stores, have a virtual tour of the store, choose the clothes he or she wants. So, how do you reskill people? Initially, people were sending catalogs. How do you then shoot the right set of pictures in a store? What's the right lighting? So, upskilling people there was a huge task for digital fluency, right? So, a lot of that, but those actions happened after the first phase of the first 3-4 months were over. They happened with very, very rapid kind of speed. And I think that's the other thing for me, that it was always possible to do this, but we were trying to do it in the normal course of things. COVID has taught us that you can do things otherwise.
Sangeeta, thank you. Your leadership examples, really big learnings for all of us coming in the COVID. So thanks a lot for sharing these ones with us. Pratik, as I come back to you, what are some of the things which you're putting into place for the long term to be much more sustainable, to be much more robust for the longer term? Are there things on the people side, or how people work, some basic rules, tenets in place, so that as we go forward, let's say next 2-3 years, we have a much more smoother ride, given what we will be facing?
I think just like COVID was a huge temporary headwind for all of us and for our category as well, I believe equally it will be an even bigger tailwind for us in the longer term. This is an inflection point that we've all sort of encountered. And I think what lies ahead is a structural transformation of multiple categories. In our category, for example, it will mean a much faster growth of the organized sector. More than 2/3 of the restaurant industry is unorganized. That share will shrink. We will see a larger share of the organized sector. Within that, a much faster growth for brands that are trusted, credible. Consumers will navigate choice making more by trust than by promotions and discounts. We will see a much greater omni-channel behavior. This business was entirely dine-in driven or largely dine-in driven. That will change, and that's already changed: dine-in, delivery, and now takeaway. Digital means of ordering, and that will obviously, that's increased and that will sustain. So we are seeing a structural shift happen. And I think, as all of us know, what COVID has done is that it's compressed 4 or 5 years of change over 6 months. Yeah, and we've encountered that as well. Now, fortunately for us as a business, I think we had sort of anticipated many of these trends without, of course, knowing about COVID, but our strategy was in a similar direction. So we had made some fundamental investments in technology, in digital, in driving omni-channel, which have stood us in good stead in the last 9 months. As we look at the next 3-4 years, the huge drivers of growth for us are going to be just sort of embracing omni-channel even more. We have a very strong delivery ecosystem. We need to strengthen that. We need to complement that with a strong foray into takeaway. Takeaway as a channel had low relevance in the Indian market pre-COVID. Post-COVID is the fastest growing channel because it gives consumers the best of both worlds. The freedom of the outdoors, the freedom of being able to go out and get a controlled experience, and therefore the safety that comes along with it. So takeaway is growing. Dine-in as a channel right now is capacity constrained. We have by law only a 50% capacity allowed. That will get relaxed over time. So dine-in will come back. So really driving omni-channel and using technology and contactless ways in all of these channels. So we just launched something called Drive and Pick as part of a takeaway offering, which essentially simulates a drive-through experience, which we see overseas. Now in India, most assets are not friendly towards drive-through. So that requires very large, expansive real estate that's not available in India. But how do you still simulate a drive-through experience with a conventional store format? And we can do that digitally. So we've launched that, and that's doing very well. So that's an example of how we drive an omni-channel experience. Digital, of course, we were early investors in digital. The Domino's app right now is typically the number one rated app ahead of the aggregator apps, which are more celebrated and more widely known. But we've had a good run. We've had a record number of app installs and downloads. We've invested aggressively in performance marketing. Now, most consumer brands invest in social media and invest in traditional marketing, not so much in performance marketing. Over the last 3 years, we've learned the ropes on performance as well, and really driven our app downloads, and our monthly active users have been the highest ever during COVID, and that number is increasing every month. So how do we really strengthen our digital infrastructure and digital assets? And what we've got, I'd like to believe, is just pawn to king 4 on the chessboard right now. We've got many more plans lined up ahead of us. And of course, the challenge here is to remember that consumers don't benchmark us vis-a-vis our traditional competitors, but they benchmark us vis-a-vis an Amazon or an Uber. So the customer benchmark has moved vis-a-vis, in terms of experience. So we have to measure up with maybe 1/3 or 1/10 of the resources. Yes, that's the other bit. The third area, of course, is that our category, the food category, of course, is a category of variety, of choice, of multiplicity. And just like we have a very strong pizza brand, how do we leverage on those capabilities and those strengths to build out an even more as powerful a portfolio on other cuisines? So the biryani brand that we launched, Ekdam, early days showing promise. How do we build that? We've got a Chinese foray going with Hong's Kitchen. Again, a year and a half into the market. Some learnings. How do we scale that up? Chef Boss as a brand, very exciting. How do we scale that up? And of course, how do we use our assets to really unbundle and to sort of uncouple the strengths that we have, digital, delivery, supply chain, and how can we monetize them and make them grow much faster? And we also have a fledgling international business. And our objective is to double down on international as well, in Bangladesh and Sri Lanka, potentially in Nepal and other countries. And how do we make these markets grow? So I'd say the structural changes that we are seeing, organized sector, trusted brands, digital, omni-channel, all in a manner of speaking, play to our strengths. And we'd like to believe that though we didn't know about the crisis, I think we are well prepared to deal with the changes that have come our way. And I think the future is very, very exciting. And like I said earlier, I think this is a period of potentially hyper growth. So looking forward to that.
I think thanks a lot. We all have your app, and we wish you all the amount of growth that you can get as you go forward.
Order, Harsh, order. Don't just have the app.
We do order. And I must compliment, I think, even the service when we have a complaint. So I think, to be honest, the speed at which the response happens whenever something does not happen in place is something to be complimented at your end. I must say that. Abhishek, to you, Pratik mentioned omni-channel, digital, a few innovations. Similar themes at your end as you go forward and re-engineer, recast the future, or you see something else which may be accretive here?
And I think for us, digital and approaching things more using technology has been something that we have been doing for the last 3-4 years, very consciously seeing the future. So we have been that way in our operations, being very futuristic. And that has really helped, like I mentioned. But I think it is about, sometimes the word digital transformation it worries me, because it's not just a transformation to something else. It's a constant evolution through digital. And I think that's something that we've all realized. So the pandemic got forth market factors, consumer trends, where we have to evolve and recast, like you mentioned. So there are elements of our business that we are using to redraw and recourse ourselves, and using technology not just in terms of the way we are approaching the consumer, but also in our business. How can we be using data? How are we becoming more process oriented? How are we using automation and tools around that? So this is very, very interesting. And I think overall, I would also like to build a very positive sentiment that we are seeing the outlook is very, very positive. I think the very fact that businesses have shown this kind of resilience consumers have shown this kind of resilience, and it is very clear that humankind cannot be held back, irrespective of the enormity of a problem. I think it shows a lot for human race itself, right? I mean, what we see in India is just incredible, right? And I hope that, with solutions around better medical understanding of the virus, as well as with vaccine, I think we will also get supported in this positivity. So I, for one, am extremely optimistic, just like Pratik mentioned, very, very optimistic. And we will go in the business that would reflect in the way we are approaching the market and the aggression that we show in the market.
Abhishek, thank you so much, and so heartening to hear about the optimism. Wish you all the best too. Sangeeta, coming over to you, and as we look at, I would say, the last round and a summarize post you, any closing thoughts, anything from your side on future of work, how it's changed life for people? Yeah, over to you.
Yeah, sure. So I think both the future of retail and the future of work is likely to change drastically. It has changed to some extent, but I think it will continue to evolve. And I think as retailers, we need to, physical retail is here to stay. And, it's not that everything is going to transform to, to a completely online business. And remember, especially in case of fashion apparel, where people want to touch and feel the product, people want to try the product, and people want advice on the product. Visit to the retail stores will stay, and it's an integral part of people's life. A day out in retail, as people call it, retail therapy. So it's not something, once people feel safe and reassured, and once we feel that the virus is more under control and we have more certainty, people actually will come out. But having said that, I think the future of retail is likely to look very different. And as I said, we will see multiple customer journeys, and therefore the evolution in the role of stores from, entry once and a single use kind of a premise to really multi-use, a click and collect, a delivery point, an experiential center. All of that will happen, and therefore the way we will kind of develop our stores and keep stores and make decisions on stores, I think would look different in the future. Equally, to your point on future of work, we are seeing already, it has taught us how, we placed and perhaps an undue importance on doing everything face to face. I hear so many friends and people say, oh, I don't know why I was traveling so much all these years. Today, I can do the same thing digitally. I think that bit about adapting digital, both from a shopper standpoint, from a consumer standpoint, personal space, I think has taught us new ways of working. And I think working solutions will become more hybrid as we move on. And I don't think there will be one or the other model where people will give up office spaces completely, but people may shrink spaces. There are some companies, some sectors who can operate completely out of home. But I think it will require, greater learning in terms of remote leadership, as I call it. And it will require us to build those muscles. Both for this, I think this short period, an intense period of 10 months, which has been a fantastic lesson for all of us, has allowed us to build muscles and to think about 5 or 6 different things, which if you keep in the context of future of retail and future of work. One is in terms of, enough has been said by both Pratik and Abhishek on the digital transformation. But the one point I'd like to make there is, I think increasingly organizations will have to build digital ecosystems. And you will have to look at partnerships, you've seen the Flipkart Myntra partnership with Birla Fashion and Retail. And obviously, it allows us to build new capabilities as we move forward. So we'll have to create those ecosystems. Second, the importance of agile supply chains. Quickly, the way we pivoted around athleisure when people were wearing comfort wear. How do you really create inventory for a completely new category? Or the second business that I run is Jaipur, which is a completely online business. Our world moved to home, right? It's fitness at home, it's study at home, it is, enjoy at home with the immediate family members. The world shifted inside the 4 walls of our home. So therefore, home is a category. We quickly launched that. So relevance of new categories and therefore requirement of agile supply chains, I think it's the second one. I think teams of the future will look different, both in retail and in offices. So redefining roles of the teams and therefore what kind of talent you need. The fourth one, I think, cost. It taught us once again the discipline of zero-based costing and trying to strip away costs from your value chain in terms of non-value added activities. We did that, I think, quite successfully. Fifth, as I said, is a new set of capabilities that you will need for the future. Data being a very, very important one, analytics being an important one. And last, I think, is a different culture that you will need to build, and therefore different kind of leadership.
Sangeeta, thank you, and thanks a lot for even stressing on the culture aspect. Very important as we sort of look through to scale and look forward to the future. Well, Sangeeta, Pratik, Abhishek, thanks a lot for being such wonderful panel members. I've learned a lot today. I've also learned that when Pratik sells more pizzas, Abhishek sort of sells more shoes, and Sangeeta will sell more apparel. That's a big learning for me. I'm sure the audience has enjoyed this. Thanks to the ET team. Have a wonderful day to everyone. Thanks once again.
Thank you, Ashwin.
Thank you, ET. Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.